Well, folks, one of the great benefits of the sport of thoroughbred horse racing is the opportunity to get to travel. And during my travels at the Dubai World Cup, I encountered none other than Chad Summers, who's on the Dubai media team. He's an independent trainer. He's trained a Dubai World Cup Golden Shaheen winner on 2 occasions and has a very, very long resume. But Chad, suffice to say, let's cut to the chase, and thank you very much for your time on this smashing weekend, this time at Keenland.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Andrew. And, really at the end of the day, I mean, this weekend here in Kentucky on Friday and Saturday is very much the Breeders' Cup World Champions. I think we have representatives from not only where they're from, I think it's maybe 13 different countries, but also, the human connections from or completely around the world. It's really a hodgepodge of international competitors, and that's what makes everything so great.
Well, the last time that I was actually in Keenland was the year 2000, when I came to visit my old friend Horse Chestnut, and that was the year that Tis Now, with Chris McCarron aboard, got up to beat Giant's Causeway in one of the most amazing duels in many, many years. And of course, he won it the next year as well. It was a great memory, and certainly one of the best Breeders' Cups I've ever seen.
No, look, the Breeders' Cup year after year, there's 14 at this point now. I mean, I think back in 2000, maybe there was 8 or 9 championship races, but now there's 14, and no matter what, you're going to see, at least at the bare minimum, a race or two that'll be a lifelong memory for sure.
Well, I'm going to start with the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile because obviously it's the race that Life is Good won last year. We saw him in Dubai. He didn't quite get home over 10 furlongs at Maidan. The fact that he's gone for the Classic this year is a bit of a mystery to me, because I'm not quite sure that against Flightline that he's got any prayer, but he's certainly got huge class, great gate speed. Let's start with Life is Good, and let's start with the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
Okay. So look, the Dirt Mile, it's kind of funny because Life is Good and Flightline, who both end up in the Classic, to me, their optimal distance for both of them very well could be a mile. And if they were in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, it would be, you talk about, that Tis Now, Giants Causeway, Beholder, Songbird, some of those fantastic finishes. That race would be unbelievable because they would be just kind of racing from start to finish, and they're both so brilliant over a mile. The way that it ends up shaking out here, it becomes an interesting race because it's a big size field, 11 horse field in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. But where they're breaking, the dynamics of the track, it's not really ideal for a mile race. So they're going to break right before the turn. So it's so important. If you have an outside post, you need to break well and try and get yourself in position and not get hung out 6 or 7 wide. And then there's 2 wires at Keeneland. This race, the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, is actually going to end at the first wire. So not only do you have to break well, but you have to finish strong because you don't have a very long stretch at all. It would probably benefit more to a speed horse that's trying to hold on. That would kind of form in the line of a horse like Gunite, son of Gunrunner for Steve Asmussen, but he's coming back in just 2 weeks rest. He won very impressively his last few starts, including last time out in the Perryville Stakes right here at Keeneland 2 weeks ago. But it's a big ask to come back in just 2 weeks' time, and this is going to be the first time he's a 3-year-old taking on older horses, so that could be a little bit of a big ask as well. The other horses you have to mention in there, Cody's Wish, a Godolphin homebred, a horse that's got a great story behind him, named after a kid who met him as a foal, named Cody, with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and actually they named the horse Cody's Wish after him, and he's a horse who's gotten better and better, upsetting Jackie's Warrior last time out in the Group 1 Forgo at Saratoga, but that was over 7 furlongs, and he's run it a mile before, but 1 turn, never 2 turns. He's come up short the 2 times he went 2 turns, and he needs to prove that he can actually see out that little bit of added distance. And I don't know necessarily from a pace scenario if he's going to get quite the trip that he got in the Forgo. The Forgo, he got a dream trip and was able to make this big move on the outside. Here he's drawn more inside, and I think he would much prefer to kind of make a wide swooping move at the end of the race. And at the end of the day, Cyberknife's in there. Cyberknife, the horse who two-time Grade 1 winner. He won the Arkansas Derby. He was in the Kentucky Derby. Things didn't go his way there early on. Came back. He won the Haskell second in the Travers. Most recently third in the Group 1 Pennsylvania Derby. He's the class of the race. He's a proven horse of the race. Could be very well his last start before he goes off to stud at Spendthrift Farm. And, people are trying to sell him short because he's been going these two-turn long distances, 1.25 miles, 1.125 miles. So you're talking about 1,800, 2,000 meters cutting back to the 1,600. But at the end of the day, he ran his first couple races at 6 furlongs at the 1,200-meter distance. And I don't see any problem with him cutting back. And to me, he's the horse to beat.
Okay, now I've got a curved ball for you. There's a horse in this race. I'm not going to mention his name, but he was supposed to run in the Pacific Classic against Flightline.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't. He went over a shorter trip, and he's already won over a mile twice, and he's quite a decent price. I think 9 to 2, 5 to 1. Who is he?
Well, that's Laurel River. Look, and Laurel River's a Juddmonte horse that he's shown flashes of brilliance, but last year he ran a giant race and then needed like 260 days off before he came back to the races. Came back. His 2 races this year have been really, really strong and solid. He's trained well for this race for Bob Baffert. But again, this is the toughest field he's ever faced. It's also the first time that he leaves California. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts there. I think he'll be a popular horse amongst the bettors out there, especially like you said, that last race when he won the Pat O'Brien was ultra impressive. But we haven't seen him since then. He's been off for 2.5 months. Again, this is by plan, and Bob Baffert's done a good job bringing these horses in fresh. But it's still a little bit of a big ask for a horse who, even though he's an older horse, is still very, very lightly raced.
Okay, so he could be a bit fragile, but he's certainly not short of class.
Correct.
Okay, let's go to the Breeders' Cup Dirt. Let's go to the Breeders' Cup Grass Mile. We obviously there's an amazing story there, but Charlie Appleby obviously well represented.
Look, Charlie's interesting. He's going to have the 2 favorites in this race between Rebel Romance and Modern Game, and they made Rebel Romance the favorite. Rebel Romance was the UAE Derby winner on the dirt a year ago, has since transitioned to grass with seemingly no problem. And then his stablemate Modern Games, a 3-year-old up-and-comer on the ranks, who spent most of his summer actually in New York, in my neck of the woods, running in places like Saratoga and Aqueduct and Belmont and places like that, and running well against his 3-year-old kind. Now, William Buick, who's the first call rider for the Godolphin Barn, had his pick of which one he wanted to ride, and he elected to stick with the younger Modern Games as opposed to Rebel Romance, who's going to end up being the favorite. But the number 2 rider there, James Doyle, certainly more than capable. He's ridden his fair share of Group 1 winners, and it's certainly no problem from the big time. So it's not like you're losing much, but it is interesting to note that the Barn's number 1 rider sticks with Modern Games. And Rebel Romance, first of all, big, beautiful, burly horse. He's really, really grown and filled out since we saw him last year in the UAE Derby. But he's done his preparation for this in Germany. His last 2 races came in Group 1s in Germany. And I don't know if there's ever been a horse who's won a Breeders' Cup race prepping for it in Germany. So very, very interesting strategy. But look, Charlie Appleby, for a while, maybe wasn't known as well in America, certainly, very well known in Dubai and what he's done in England and even in Australia, winning the Cox's Plate over there and everything else. He can seemingly do no wrong. And look, he's won 6 of 11 Breeders' Cup races that he's been in. And those stats are just absolutely unparalleled and unheard from. And certainly anytime you see one of his horses in the race, you have to give it, strong consideration. And that's what you're looking at there.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the preparation being done in Germany. I tell you who else did that this year was Sir Mark Prescott. He only ended up winning the Arc. That's not a bad recommendation.
Are we sensing a trend here, as you're saying?
Well, you never know. You've got to take cognizance of these things. I mean, they're not worth ignoring.
If you look at Modern Games at the end of the day, what he was able to accomplish when he won the Woodbine Mile was very, very impressive. And I just thought, even though he ran second last time, I just thought that his second was just a little flat. Now, maybe it was a prep for this all along. I don't think he necessarily had to run in the race, but I did think it was just maybe a touch flat for what we're looking for in this race. And look, this is a very, very deep field of horses, including a horse like Kinross, who's coming in here that's well represented. And he was as impressive as a horse can be on the York undercard for Ralph Beckett.
Okay, and from a local perspective, is there any horse that can hold a candle to the Europeans? I think there is.
Who would you lean that candle towards?
Well, speaking to a guy by the name of Greg Watson, who's on our group, he said there's a horse in this race that's coming back after a very, very lengthy break, which I found extraordinary.
Okay.
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're talking about the Chad Brown horse, domestic spending, who's breaking from he's breaking from post 14. Certainly was not given any favorites. This horse was actually the favorite or second choice last year in the Breeders' Cup Turf, and ended up getting scratched by the vets. I believe he ended up having a bow tendon, and he hasn't been seen from since. And in fact, most of us just figured he was retired. All of a sudden in August, if you check over here in America, we have the work report. So you see all the horses when they work, the day they work, a little bit different than what they do in other parts of the world. And you saw his name show up on there, like just 3 furlongs, 600 meters and 39. Oh, okay. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe it's his brother. They got the name wrong. And then you saw the times getting quicker and getting further. And you're like, what? Okay, well, I guess maybe they're trying to, bring the horse back, come back, maybe something next year. And then he went to Keenland, and he's still breezing. And now he's breezing in company with Breeders' Cup horses, and he's just crushing them. I mean, his works in the morning time have been kind of the talk of the town. And Chad Brown decided to go right to the Breeders' Cup off the year layoff, more than a year layoff. We haven't seen him, I think, since the Arlington Million. The last time the Arlington Million was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where, look, he's training tremendous. He's a really cool horse. He needs pace in front of him. That's what got him beat in Chicago last year. He's not a horse that really likes to take it to his horses early. And at the mile distance, he can't afford to go out the back door. Now, off the 14-month layoff, maybe he's going to be fresh. He's going to be sharp. And just naturally, tactically, he can put himself in the gate. And he's got a great rider in Flavian Pratt. So anything is more than possible. But man, if he were to win this race, I mean, this would be shades of a horse named the Haas from Michael Dickinson, who won a Breeders' Cup race. And then 2 years later came back off one prep and an allowance race to win a second one. This would be really, really impressive if you were able to do it. I mean, it's a deep field. Also from the Americans, you have an up-and-coming 3-year-old named Annapolis for Todd Pletcher, who actually set the track record when he ran here first time against older horse just 3 weeks ago. So very, very deep field.
Okay, just before we leave that race, the configuration of the mile as opposed to the dirt, is there more of a straight to work with, and is this the second wire that we're talking about here?
Yeah, this one will be the second wire. This will be a little bit of a different race. The turf course is a little bit, the configuration's a little bit distant, so it'll actually be once around as opposed to the mile and an eighth dirt course where the mile you start so much on the turn.
So the grass is in the inside of the dirt.
Correct. Yeah. In America, we do things a little bit differently. Our dirt courses are outside. I know the rest of the world that would be unheard of because they don't like dirt, but over here, our dirt races are inside or outside.
Except Dubai. Dubai is just a mirror of basically of the American system. Okay, let's touch on the distaff quickly because obviously we had a filly called Spook Express that once ran in the distaff, and she unfortunately had to play second fiddle to one of the best fillies in the world. She was a Juddmonte filly called Banks Hill, and we now have her son in South Africa, a horse called Ideal World.
Okay. No, listen, Banks Hill was you talk about a deep family. I mean, Banks Hill was from I think what wasn't Banks Hill part of that the son of Tussaud that had so many of those great I think 4 or 5 maybe Breeders' Cup horses. I think Intercontinental was a half and Empire Maker, just a crazy family.
Yes, I'm pretty sure you're right. I know that she was
Yeah.
by Danehill, but you're talking
Yeah.
about the same family.
Yeah, I think so. She was a cool horse. But look, at the end of the day, the distaff is going to come down to 2 superstar trainers, Todd Pletcher and Steve Asmussen. Todd Pletcher is going to be represented by the 2 favorites. You have Malathot, who is owned by Shadwell Stables and Sheikh Ahissa, trying to go out a winner. She's unbeaten at Keenland. She's 3 for 3 lifetime over there, a track that she loves. She won the Kentucky Oaks a year ago, and she's taking on her younger stablemate in Nest, who is a 3-year-old who was second in the Kentucky Oaks, and since then has turned into just an absolute beast of a horse. She came back and ran second against the boys in the Belmont Stakes, and then proceeded to win both of her races in Saratoga by open lengths, the Collegiate Club of America and the Alabama. And then she ran the other day, first time against older horses in the Beldame, which is historically a pretty good race for the Breeders' Cup distaff. And she just toyed with them. I mean, she is a filly who is growing up right before our eyes, and she looks like one of those tennis players like Venus or Serena Williams that all of a sudden you see this power from her. And she just seems to be getting better and better as time has gone on. And you talk to the Todd Pletcher barn, and they're split. I mean, this is 2 champion mares. Even Todd Pletcher said, look, I don't want to run them against each other, but this is the Breeders' Cup. And so, they both deserve a chance to run for the championship. So you have the 2 of them, and then you add into the mix Steve Asmussen, who's got Clairiere, who actually defeated Malathot 2 of their last 3 starts, who was a Grade 1 winner in her own right and has gotten better and better. Had an excuse last time. She just lost her mind on the gate, which is very uncharacteristic of her and of the Steve Asmussen barn. I think they'll have that corrected. And then you add into the fact the 3-year-old filly named Society. This is a daughter of Gunrunner, who obviously Gunrunner has done so little wrong and is one of the leading sires in America in just his second year at stud with second foals on the ground. And the thing with Society that's the most interesting is she might not be the talentedest of the 4 main contenders, but she's the fastest. And on paper, she's breaking from the outside in post 8, and it looks like she might be able to clear and be in front early by 2 or 3 lengths. And if she does that, we saw last time in the $1 million Grade 1 Cotillion at Parks, she'll get brave. And so she might just all of a sudden find that little bit extra while you have these other 3 monsters just coming down on her. It should make for just an absolutely remarkable race. I don't see somebody winning here by open lengths. I think it's just going to be a great race.
Are the rules in America the same as they are in South Africa, that you have to be a safe distance ahead before you can cross, given the fact that she's drawn 8 and she's got the gate speed?
Listen, rule there may be suggestions in mind. Come the Breeders' Cup. Look, well, obviously we have our stewards that are there to police and enforce the rules, but I don't want to call it the Wild West. But this is with so much on the line, championships and so much money on the line and everything else. These jockeys are going to be aggressive, and they're going to do things that they think is going to help them the most winning the race. And if they squeeze somebody or they come in tight, listen, this is anything. They want to win these races. There's no tomorrow for these races.
Yeah, and I guess from the gate. Not everybody's got momentum, so it's about the horse with the fastest gate speed that gets that advantage.
Yeah, basically. And if you remember back to the Breeders' Cup in 2000 and was it 14 maybe or 13, with Bayern coming out of the gate and winning the Breeders' Cup Classic and cutting off Shared Belief, and there was that long inquiry for about 15, 20 minutes.
I remember that.
And they ended up not making a change. So when they come out of the gate, especially, the stewards are more prone to just let things play out, more so than to sit there and right away, if you come over, you squeeze one or one has to check, to right away disqualify you. They're more prone to let things play themselves out, especially over the first 100 meters or so.
Right. We're on to the Breeders' Cup Classic on the grass, 10 furlongs. And what have you got for us here, Chad?
Look, it's a cool race. Obviously, we know Mischief well on the international scene. He's a horse who, stopped the world really when he shocked the world, and defeated the two best American horses on the dirt, winning the Saudi Cup 2 years ago. Since then, it's been an up and down. It's been an up and down career for Mischief, and this will be his last ever start before he goes off to the breeding shed. They're adding blinkers now for some reason, switching jockeys again. Now switching to Frankie Dettori, who's going to be, I think, the fourth jockey in the last four starts. I just feel like it's a little bit of a play. Look, he's a beautiful horse, and Thaddeus and John Godson have done a remarkable job with this horse throughout his career. But he hasn't won this year, and I just think, this is more of them
I'm on the phone to Chad
taking a shot.
in America. He's in Keenland.
What's that?
No, my wife just arrived home from her sisters, and I just told her that I'm on the phone to you in Keenland. So I couldn't talk, but now I'm going to have to edit it.
But yeah,
Sorry about that.
I think it's all good. I think Mischief is going to be up against it. From America, we're going to be represented by a filly or mare named Warlike Goddess. And if you watch her replays, it's really funny because she wins almost all the time, but she never looks very impressive. Like she just finds a way to get up and win, and they think the further the better. Instead of running in the filly mare distaff, where she would have been the favorite, mind you, at 1 mile and 3/8, they're gonna run here. They think that extra furlong going 1.5 miles plays to her advantage, and she's a cool horse to represent kind of the Americans. And what's overall, even though it'll be a good race, I think overall it's not the strongest race on the card for sure.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave that race right there because I think we've got to concentrate now on the big one for the afternoon, because obviously Flightline is a horse that's got wraps on him as big as Secretariat, which is somewhat you just can't have words. You can't find the words to express what we've seen so far. He hasn't done what Secretariat did in his lifetime, but probably no horse ever has. But he's certainly shaping up as one of the finest racehorses that we've seen in the last half century.
So I get very conflicted here. I was told about this. First of all, look, he's a $1 million yearling by Tapit, who's the number one sire in America. And so obviously come with that big expectations. And he went to the farm, and he got hurt on the farm when they were breaking him. And he came back, and when he went to John Sadler for the first time, he was broke by Mayberry Farm. Now, Mayberry Farm is best known for breaking horses like Zenyatta, like Accelerate, like Catalina Cruiser. The list goes on and on. So obviously have a huge reputation behind them. And April Mayberry, who was the one that most oversaw Flightline as a yearling into 2-year-old and breaking him, she told me when he went to the track in California, she said, listen, this is the best horse I've ever been around. She said, I don't want to sell it short, and you never know what's going to happen, but he's something different. And the first time he ever breezed, John Sadler called April Mayberry, and he said, I agree with you. This is the best horse I've ever seen. And it's very difficult to put into words just how talented he is. And he was difficult when he was younger. It took him a while to get to the races, and he's so fast that you almost hold your breath every time he goes around there. Watching him gallop, this is the first time I've ever gotten a chance to watch him train. I've obviously always watched his races, and I saw him run in New York in the Met Mile, but I never saw him train. Watching him train with former jockey, now assistant Juan Leva aboard, a Breeders' Cup winning jockey in his own right, the horse just kind of flies around there, and he literally, to his name, almost takes flight while he's out there, and it's really impressive. I mean, he'll gallop 14-second 8 miles and seemingly not get tired, and it seems like the sky is the limit. And with that comes the hype train, and then with the hype train comes social media now, which there wasn't social media during Secretariat or Man O' War or Dubai Millennium or any of those kind of horses. But with that being said, he is going to be an overwhelming favorite. And the expectation right now, the expectation is that not only is he going to win, but he's going to win this race by 10, 15 lengths, like he's done everything else in his life. But Andrew, I have to tell you,
Can't do it.
he's never faced a field like this in his life. He's run against a course or two that's okay, but never anything to the extent. I mean, this is as deep a field as he'll ever face. You're talking about Life is Good, who we started the show talking about how brilliant he's been and flashes of things that he's shown. You have Taiba, an up-and-coming 3-year-old, Epicenter, who's probably going to be the 3-year-old champion, Rich Strike, who won the Kentucky Derby. We have Hot Rod Charlie, who was second in the Belmont Stakes last year. He was second in the Breeders'
Dubai
Cup
World
Juvenile,
Cup.
fourth last year in the Breeders' Cup, second in the Dubai World Cup, a horse who just has a big heart and a big fight. You have Olympiad, who's run 7 times this year and has 6 wins, and 3 of them were Grade 1. So to me, this is a true field. And the
Where's
more
the
I
Dubai World
race,
Cup winner? What happened to him?
oh, he got beat by 20 lengths last time by Flightline, so he's skipping this race.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, he represents Hot Rod Charlie. Let's be honest, on his Dubai World Cup form, and other
yes
form.
and no. Yes and no. My feeling is, and we were there for that race. Okay, it was a very strangely run race. I think Life is Good got too cute. He took back. He didn't go as fast early. Life is Good is best when he's just allowed to go and just be a free horse and not fight him. When they get concerned if he can see out the 1.25 miles and they're grabbing a hold of him, he doesn't like that. And even last time out, he ran in what was almost a walkover race in a 5-horse field, a race called the Woodward, and only won by 1.5 lengths, 2 lengths, because he was doing the same thing. You have to just push the pedal and let him do his thing. And then you add into the Dubai World Cup, Hot Rod Charlie was getting the kickback, and the kickback in Maidan is different than anywhere else you're going to find in the world. It hurts when it kicks back at you. And Chuck, even though he'd been training there and he had a prep over the track, he didn't like that kickback, and he came back and he fought it, and he kind of dropped himself back out of the race, and he re-rallied. If you actually watch that race closely, he actually makes a huge move to get up and be second in there. And since then, he came back. He won an important race last time in the Lucas Classic just to kind of get himself back on track. And he's the key in this race, because when you look at the scope and the dynamics of the race, not just the individual, where maybe Flightline is the best horse, even though he's only run 5 times in his life and twice this year. Maybe he's the best horse we've ever seen in the last 50 years. But he has a target on his back now. So in a field of 8, there are 7 other jockeys and 7 other horses that are running specifically to beat Flightline. They're not trying to do their thing. At this point, everybody knows where Flightline is. And when I look at the dynamics of the race, to me, Life is Good, breaks and clears, and he's in front by 2 or 3 lengths. Hopefully, Irad just letting him do his thing, going a half in 46 instead of 48. Just opening up his hands, dropping his hands, not fighting the horse like he did in Dubai. And then Flightline breaks. His first step out of the gate isn't the quickest. He actually broke a little slow in the Met Mile earlier this year. And then he came back in the Pacific Classic, and he broke okay, but he was content to sit second for a little while until he just kind of inherited the lead over a really bad horse. Here, if his first step is a step slow, Life is Good is 2-3 lengths ahead of him, which is fine. And they're going to think that Flightline can sit and can come off of it and be in the trip. However, Hot Rod Charlie breaks right outside of him. And what people tend to forget about Hot Rod Charlie, if you go back to his Belmont Stakes performance, he can break and go with the best of them. He's set almost all the fractions in the Belmont Stakes. He is a fast horse when he wants to be. And Tyler Gaffalione knows this. He's been on him a few times. He's breezed them. And I feel like Tyler Gaffalione can put all the pressure on Flightline, breaking right outside of him, and keeping Flightline squeezed inside. And if Flightline squeezed inside behind Life is Good, getting the dirt from Life is Good, then we're going to see a real horse race. Because at that point now, not only does Flightline have to win the race, he has to overcome adversity, which he's never really had to do. They try to make a case that, he broke slow in the Met Mile, but that race was never in doubt. And maybe, look, if he wins this race by 10 lengths, I'll crown him. I'll be the first one there to congratulate them and crown him as the best horse in North America in the last 50 years. However, I see very much a scenario where he's going to have his work cut out for him. And we don't know what's going to happen because he's never actually had a horse look him in an eye. And that's what makes horse racing so special. And that's what makes the special horses so special, is when they're looked in the eye, what happens? Do they find that extra gear? Do they show that championship grit and determination that they have that wants to make them win every race? Or do they fold? Are they a herd animal? Are they a follower instead of a leader? That's what we're going to find out on Saturday if the race sets up the way I think it does. And you have a horse like Epicenter, young up-and-coming 3-year-old, who's going to be sitting there just watching all this develop in front of him with his new running style and the races that he's won in Saratoga the last 2 times, just sitting back and making that one run. And he says go, and Joel Rosario says go, while the other horses have been doing all of the heavy lifting up front. It's going to make, I think, it could make for a very, very, very exciting finish. And I'm not ready to crown Flightline as quick as the rest of America and as the rest of the world.
Well, I must admit, while you were talking, I got goosebumps because I think to myself, what does the world need? The world aspires to great heroes. And obviously it was very sad that Baid went out on a rather damp note at Ascot. But if Flightline and Flavien Prat decide that Life is Good is actually making things difficult for him, and he's going to test Life is Good, and he's going to shrug off the attentions of Hot Rod Charlie, we could be in for the performance that crowns him as one of the most supreme horses. And he's got everything. He's got the reps on him from the time that he was broken in. He's got the pedigree, and he's got a faultless record thus far.
No, listen, that's what this comes down to. There's a lot on the line here for Flightline, because if he wins, then he's crowned. He goes off to the sunset, undefeated, untested, unbeaten, the whole 9. But if he loses, he's a cool horse with a good career. That's 5 from 6 lifetime. Only ran 6 times. It takes the edge off a little bit, takes the appeal off a little bit. Still brilliant, and I think he'll still be given a tremendous opportunity at stud. But the narrative, look, from a media standpoint, right? And you've done this for a long time, Andrew. Not only worked with horses, but covered things from a media standpoint. The narrative that plays out here is really great, because from us, it's a situation where either one's going to be super exciting.
We've got exactly 1 minute and 38 seconds left. Could this possibly be the best Breeders' Cup Classic that you have witnessed?
Yeah, no, it is, because nobody's ever come in with as much hype. And look, great horses have gotten beat here. We've seen Cigar beaten in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and then you've seen horses crowned. You've seen horses like American Pharoah completing the quote-unquote Grand Slam after winning the Triple Crown. But this is, to me, when you talk about Breeders' Cup Classic from top to bottom, the depth that's in this field. If you eliminate Flightline, everyone goes, what a great race it is. They've want to crown Flightline, but to me, I think it's a great race, a great test. And when they turn for home and all of Keenland's back with the COVID gone and the crowd there, that place is going to erupt one way or the other, and I can't wait.
38 seconds to go, Chad. What is Chad Summers doing there? Are you there as a spectator, or have you got contestant? You've got 30 seconds to wrap it.
Yeah, I purchased Cyberknife as a yearling, and I managed the things for the Gold Square operation with Joe Hardoon, and so looking forward to our owner Al Gold of Gold Square having his first runner in the Breeders' Cup, and look, for anybody for their first experience, we want to make it a memorable one, and hopefully we come out on top in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile.
We are grateful beyond description for your time. We love seeing your face again, and we hope that you have an incredible day tomorrow, and of course.